Biggity bam, we're back. Hi, Craig. Hi, Chris. I'm Jay.
Hi, Jay. Hi, Craig.
Welcome to the Grumpy Dungeon Masters. That's going to be my new intro, I think. Biggity bam.
Is that like the Rick Sanchez version for like, I'm sad and alone, please help me?
I was thinking more like Emerald Lagasse. He had bam. And then we got the Diners Drive and whatever his name was. I think he had a saying. Then the cake boss had his thing, but I don't remember what it was at this point. Everybody needs a catchphrase. Biggity bam.
Speaking of catchphrases, when I was like making the website for Grumpy Dungeon Masters, just so we could have a place for the podcast to get pulled from and uploaded, you try to think of just a catchphrase that relates to D&D, Matt Mercer's like, oh man,
How do you want to do this?
No, may all your hits be crits, and the couple other good ones out there. They're all used. Every single one of them is just used up by somebody somewhere. There's no original phrases anymore. So
this is a challenge.
Well, we need a catchphrase for the Grumpy Dungeon Masters overall. So right now,
listeners, throw one at us. Hook us up. Something that's not been used.
Right now, it's just nat 1 with every roll, which pretty much sums up my last game.
That sums up my other DM's last game. Like we played last night, and he was rolling a lot of trash, which was good for the players, mind you.
Yeah, I couldn't roll like over 10, I think, yesterday when I was doing Rime of the Frost Maiden, and it just dragged out encounters because no one was dying, and
that's me if I'm DMing. Anytime I'm DMing, if I'm rolling initiative, I'm going last. Like, yeah, it's a fucking certainty. I will go last.
That's why you need to put all your dice with the highest value of the die facing up. That way, over time, the plastic particles settle down at the lowest on the opposite side of your highest value, causing your die to roll higher numbers over time.
All right,
it only takes like a couple 100,000 years for that to actually shift to happen, but you need to start it now.
Well, I've probably got another 6 months until I actually get to play in person again, so I'm going to go ahead and just set my dice out now and get that process started.
You guys should put like a heat lamp over them. I think that helps speed it up.
It also makes them lumpy. Heat lamp, not a good idea.
I bought for my wife this Christmas a set of dice, as you do now that D&D has consumed our lives, and it had little seashells on the inside. And the creator of them promised that the dice themselves are balanced properly to not always roll, the same range of numbers over and over again because of the seashells on the inside. And I'm not questioning their quality, and I have not checked, but I do not believe
that's how that works. I'm no physicist, but I'm fairly certain that's not how that works.
I mean, I know there are companies out there that sell dice that have things inside, and they go through and actually like cut out like little notches on the other side to make things perfectly balanced. I had a player years ago who spent like $150 on a set of true random dice, and it was basically the amount of plastic they took away in certain areas created a truly random die. And then he gets it, and it's just a single color. There's nothing fancy about it, but the numbers were all carved out, and you couldn't really see what number it was unless you had a flashlight and kind of looked at it at a weird angle because of the milling process they did to get them truly random.
That's the old Gary Gygax dice, honestly, because they were milled out like that. That's why they would take a crayon and fill them in.
So he took a bunch of colored wax and he filled in those number crevices. But that instantly changes the weight of the die. So now your $100 true random dice are now useless because you just added more weight to random sides of it.
Yeah, and the weight's not going to be proper no matter what you do at that point.
And when when we mentioned that to him, he kind of looked at his D20, and he looked back up at me, and he looked back down at the D20, and went, "Well, shit." It was
See, I am no dice aficionado. Like I just have random sets of dice that I've picked up over the years. But every once in a while, I actually see dice that I'm like, man, I really want that. And like the only ones that have ever really stood out to me is the ones actually made out of meteorite.
Yeah,
I've always wanted a set of those, and then the ones that are actually made out of mammoth bone.
yeah. There's two set of dice I would really like to get at, or I guess three. I'd like to get a set of metal die. I'd like to get a set of like space meteorite die, and I'd like to get a set of die made out of bone.
Yeah,
But I don't want mammoth bone. I want like like
want baby seal
Gary.
bone.
I want Gary Gygax's bones as a set of die.
I'm fairly sure that's not legal, but I'm on board.
Listen, if Grumpy Dungeon Masters blows up and becomes super duper famous, and we become world renowned, worldwide known, and everyone knows our name before I die, I will put in my will that a set of dice has to be made from like my femur.
Yeah,
And
you are
being that
allowed to take my femur and make sets of dice for all of my number one fans.
and being that I'm like 6'20", half a ton, I'm pretty sure you can get a couple sets of dice out of my bones
Yeah,
alone
I'm fairly sure we could do a few sets out of it.
and have those out there. Morbid, yes, but I think it'd be entertaining.
Ooh, I know how you do it. What you do is you actually just make normal sets of dice, but just have a tiny chip of your femur bone in the middle of each one. So that way you get a lot
No,
more dice out there, and then you make more money off of it.
no, it's gotta be completely solid bone. Like I'm rolling the Grumpy Dungeon Master tonight.
I only break this out for special occasions. We're fighting a red dragon.
So I don't think we've talked about dice too much, but I actually have a weird, let's call it tick, when it comes to dice. I have to buy a new set of dice for every PC that I play in Dungeons and Dragons. Now,
It's
being a lifelong DM, I don't have that many sets, but I got about 20 or so.
That is not that weird of a tick. I've known other people who do that.
Okay. So when I tell people that that's what I do, they just look at me like I'm crazy. They're
Well,
like, "What?"
I'm a D&D player. I mean, we are a superstitious lot. You know, don't touch other people's dice. Don't ever let somebody else's dice touch your dice. Got to warm it up before you roll it. Get the nat ones out of here and only get me 20s all night. Like we're a superstitious bunch of people.
So like, I have a lot of friends, and they all have like their different ways they take care of their dice. And one of my players has one of those giant dice bags just full of dice,
Uh huh.
and he is taken to basically rolling a fresh d20 every single roll in the Icewind Dale game. And if he doesn't do that, his character starts missing every single shot. um, but like, there are a couple people who like I've played with who would basically like roll one, and like if they fail the next roll and roll another one in the night, they'll just throw that die away forever and
Oh
never roll
no.
with it again.
So I used to play at this location. It was called the King's Table. This was 20 some odd years ago. And we were right on a major highway. Uh, I'm not even gonna say where it's at, but it's a major ass highway. And every like we would have a bad game session or whatever. Somebody just roll a bunch of ones, and I can't tell you how many times we would go out there at 1 a.m. in the morning and just chuck dice down this highway. Just bounce them down the road because of them rolling crap.
Yeah, I think that's illegal.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's past statutes of limitations at this point.
I hear a knock at your door, Jay.
Yeah, but just in case, allegedly this was a thing that went on. Allegedly.
My wife bought me a dice bag, and I'm kind of torn between how to actually store the dice because of my tick with having the different set of dice per character. I don't know whether to store the dice in like one set of dice in each of the pockets, or like just like combine them all together and have a giant like here are all the d20s, here are all those. Because like I won't be using those dice really again. Maybe if I get another character, maybe I'll pull one of those out, like another bard. Like I bought a set for a bard, and I only played it one time.
Mhm.
So if I make another bard, I can use that set of dice again. I have a set of white dice with black numbers that I use for great weapon fighters. So like I would use that again, but like how do I store it? Do I just like leave them in the boxes and not use the present that I got, or do I combine them all together? And
No, if it was a present, those stay separate.
no, what I'm saying is all the previous dice that I have, my wife got me a dice bag.
Mhm.
Do I combine them all together? Because of all the dice that I have, just combine them all together and have like pockets for each type.
Yeah, it's a quandary. So my
I'm
I
torn.
actually, yeah, I'm kind of torn on that one as well. So I have, I don't know, 6 or 7 bricks of dice. Like the little cubic cubes of dice, and I keep the sets in those cubes separate. And then I have a dice bag full of random dice that I have, and some of them used to be sets that I've lost dice to or whatever. And I tend to keep my full sets separate and my mixed up dice together in that bag. So if you have a set, that's how I would do it. Just keep those separated from everything else, and then any random stuff utilize the bag for.
Huh. Well, I don't have very many random sets. I did start buying the D&D official like sets per setting, like the Sword Coast setting
Right,
and
right, right. Yeah,
the Baldur's
yeah.
Gate. Those are really nice dice, but they go
Plus, they
with
they come in the box too. Yeah,
yeah, they go come with their box, and they also come with a bunch of pictures and stuff. So you really can't use those. Like I can't mix those up.
you have to keep those separated.
Yeah.
Uh, as far as superstitions, the only one there's only a couple of them I utilize, and I know how silly this shit is. I don't roll red and black dice, just fucking out. That stems from a long, long time ago, me playing vampire and just rolling absolute and utter trash because I was rolling red and black dice. So I never ever use them. I don't buy them. The other one is at the beginning of the night, I will take my multiple sets of dice and I'll tend to pick 2 out of the 7 or 8 of them that I own as to what I'm using for the night by just sort of rolling them and see what's rolling best before the game starts.
I just have to have all my dice sitting face up with the highest values up, or else I get kind of crazy. So like if you watch a stream and I'm like looking off the side and like I'm playing with stuff, because I'm resetting all the dice that I just rolled.
A
It's
little
back to the
OCD about it, huh?
no, not at all. I don't know what you're talking
No,
about.
not
Not
even
not
remotely.
turn around twice, clap twice. All right.
Yeah, if any of our listeners have weird ticks, OCDs, or superstitions, feel free to let us know about them so we can make fun of you just like we make fun of ourselves about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this new book, Speculation. Go ahead and tell people about what you know about it.
I know nothing about it. No one knows anything about it.
Well, when is it supposed to come out?
The 12th.
Of what month?
This month. Well, it's coming out in March. But they're announcing it um on the 12th of this month, so in 2 days. Um Nothing is known about the book or what's going on. It's just all speculation on what it could possibly be.
See, I
Um,
saw you mention the Feywild.
so there's a couple of theories going on right now. Um, Let me get some notes here real quick.
Mind you, I've been reading on the Feywild all week just because of you mentioning that, and because there's other stuff going on possibly with Feywild that we'll talk about another time.
So there's a lot of theories out there, and I think normally what they want to do for like what people are thinking is that in March, in the March timeframe, they usually have a very uh, experimental kind of book. Um,
How so?
Wildmount came out the year before, um, and then there was the anthology came out. So yeah, Wildmount came out last year. The anthology came out the year before that, and during this time frame. So usually the riskier kind of like is this going to work book comes out at the beginning of the year, and then later on in the year they try to release one adventure and usually one supplement. Now this past year they released 4 books altogether. They released the 2 setting books. They released Wild Mount, and they also re-released Curse of Strahd. So, oh sorry, 5 and Tasha's. So there was quite a big year this last year.
Yep.
So overall, people are kind of like, okay, what's going to happen? They have said that they're going to be focusing a lot more on settings this upcoming year. So people are thinking, okay, it's going to be one of the settings. So people have been thinking that it's going to be Dark Sun, or it's going to be the Planescape, or it's going to be Spelljammer, or it's going to be Dark Sun. I know I mentioned that twice.
Hashtag Dark Sun. We can
uh,
only hope.
but people are also expecting another Magic the Gathering setting, and
That seems more likely.
so the other big guess is the Feywild. And the reason why the Feywild pops up in people's mind is that there is one of the authors of this book that's been leaked online. Not leaked, but when you go to Barnes and Noble and Penguin Publishing House, there is it shows like who the authors are for the book ahead of time, and one of the authors worked on the Feywild for 4th edition, which is
Okay.
the latest Feywild book out there. He also worked on a couple other things that he kind of gives evidence. Maybe it's Spelljammer or Planescape as well too.
Okay, so whoever this author is, he's the asshole I have to thank for my hatred of the Eladrin.
Probably not.
Oh no, almost certain. Well, whoever added them into D&D 4th edition as a playable race, that's who I. Yeah, fuck you, Eladrin. Like they completely rewrote them.
So the Eladrin in 4th edition were very unique, but that came out in Player's Handbook 1.
They weren't unique. They were elves to elves. Like they were so elf that it was an elf. You know,
Yeah.
hey bro, I heard you like some elf, so I got some elf for your elf. Like that's what the fuck they were. Previously, because they first popped up, I think in 2nd edition, and they were celestial. They weren't even fey.
Well, now they're attuned to the seasons. So
Yeah.
they don't know what
It,
they
it,
are.
it just annoys me that you try to rewrite shit that people already know about. Hate that.
So yeah, this tangent's going somewhere. Eladrin was the base player in the handbook. This guy wrote Heroes of the Feywild. It was a supplement. It was at the end of 4th edition. So there's an idea that it may be the Feywild as well. The other thing that it could be is Dragonlance, but there's problems going on with Dragonlance, which may or may not hinder any kind of setting book coming out for Dragonlance.
Yeah, because of lawsuits and whatnot.
Right. But even if they were to release a Dragonlance book, I don't think it would be in March. It would be later on in the year when the book would come out, so to speak.
Possibly, but I mean,
it was supposed to come out later on in 2021.
But releasing a supplement ahead of time gives people who are not familiar with the setting more time to get familiar with the setting, and then they see the book, then they buy the book 6 months later.
Maybe. The biggest key, what kind of makes me think that it's the Feywild, is the Neverwinter MMO. Is still going on, it seems, somehow, some way, and
it's amazing.
They released a trailer for their next like little content expansion, and generally they try to release content expansions that coincide with book releases. And the trailer was about Shanandar, some Feywild realm in Faerun. So between the author being linked to the Feywild and his trailer being linked to the Feywild, and normally the trailers or the content settings that they release in Neverwinter matches whatever the next setting book is, everyone's thinking that it's probably going to be Feywild. There's a lot of evidence, and if you could just go on Reddit and just look D&D spoilers, there's pages of people saying it's going to be this one thing or that other thing, and
naturally, I mean, we're doing the same thing on a podcast.
Yeah.
We're sitting here speculating.
But I'm gonna go with Feywild. I don't necessarily want Feywild, honestly. I rather that they leave that alone for a little while. being that fourth edition just came out with theirs at the end, and there's so many other settings that are unused. Like, I don't think
Oh yeah.
you don't need to take the most chaotic plane of a setting and then kind of like bring more structure to it.
I mean,
You kind of
personally,
need
I would like to see them actually start if they're going to specifically focus on Forgotten Realms like they have been this entire edition. Like, I would like for them to actually start doing what they did with third edition and releasing locations in there, and not just campaigns. But I would love to see just a book on Thay, or a book on Sword Coast. Well, I think they already did a Sword Coast book, but you understand what I'm saying. A book on Anarok, the specific locations.
I want a book that's not on the fucking Sword Coast. Got it.
Yeah, yeah. No,
There's a
yeah,
lot of the
Sword
Sword Coast.
Coast is there's plenty out there on the Sword Coast already, but there with Forgotten Realms, especially with the novels and everything that go on, there's constant updating of what's going on in that world.
Yeah.
And it's always been a thing, since second edition, whereas things are happening, they're releasing game content books that are adjusting for those storylines. And they haven't done that with this edition. I guess they have sort of with the campaigns, but all of the campaigns, from my understanding, are Sword Coast. You know, you got Baldur's Gate, you got Waterdeep. Like, that's all up in that northwest corner of the map. There's nothing else anywhere that I'm aware of.
I mean, Tomb of Annihilation. Some
Oh,
shit.
okay. Well, yeah, but Tomb of Annihilation is just a remake of something from
No,
years
no.
ago.
There's Tomb of Annihilation is the new Tomb of Horrors, but it's not necessarily a remake of Tomb of Horrors. It's more that it's like, here's Cholt, here's everything that goes on in Cholt, here's all the cool stuff that happens in Cholt, here's all the culture for Cholt, here's all the dinosaurs. It was a dinosaur setting, and then they turn it around
And
and
Chult is not. It's not a very popular locale. I mean, it's just not.
a lot in Tomb of Annihilation kind of almost requires knowledge from like what happened outside during in Cholt and trying to solve the death curse and stuff that goes on. But you
Mhm.
can just very easily just do what I did and start right in front of the Tomb of Annihilation and go, "Good luck, everybody."
Yeah, here you go. Best of luck. When we played it, I never even made it to the Tomb of Annihilation before the campaign. Before I had to leave the game, because like we're running around in the jungle, for several game sessions. I think we're fourth or fifth level when I didn't. At that point, I just didn't have the time to keep playing.
There's so much there. There's like I said, there's running around the jungle, and then you find like a couple of villages, and you got to do stuff for them. Then you got to
Mhm.
find an ancient lost city, and that's a huge place to deal with. And then you find the thing to send you off to find the thing, to find the thing, to find the thing, to find the Tomb of Annihilation.
Yep.
And it's just start in front of Tomb of Annihilation. Hey,
I,
there are
I will give
dinosaurs
you
out
I will
there.
give you the key to the entrance to the tomb, but first you must bring me a shrubbery, and then you get to go and get the shrubbery. You then have to bring that person something so that they'll give you access to the shrubbery. It's the Final Fantasy quest lines. I mean, bring me this thing to bring me this thing to bring me this thing.
Yeah. But overall, it's a. So I did find the guy's name. It was Rodney Thompson. He's the one that wrote Heroes of the Feywild for fourth edition and the Monster Vault for fourth edition. His credits also include Dark Sun. So
All of Dark
um,
Sun?
yeah.
Huh. Well, I've never heard of
So
the guy. But hey, I liked Dark Sun. Dark Sun was awesome.
that's why there's all people who are saying it could be this or that. But my bet is the Feywild. My other reasoning for, to answer the other questions, like with all the new settings and stuff that they could possibly come out with, I don't want them to come out with a setting that has setting in the past. I want something brand new. And I say that knowing how difficult it is to make something brand new and how much of a risk that really is. But I think that just pulling from Magic the Gathering is a good risky but not risky solution, like Theros.
It's lazy.
It's not lazy, it's just like too convenient. But they're supposed to be coming out with a Magic the Gathering expansion set where it takes place in 1920s like fantasy world. Okay, I want to see the fifth edition version of 1920s fantasy world.
I don't. Not even
Like,
remotely.
I personally don't think I'm gonna play it, but like, just have that setting, have that thing out there. Like, if you play Cthulhu, you have like four different variants, four different time frames you could play that in. You could play it in modern
Right.
time,
Yeah.
or the
Yep.
1980s, or the 1920s. But I
Or the
think the
1890s.
yeah, but I think like something like that would work out well because everyone is.
They already have that though. Like 5e modern is a thing. It already exists.
But I want an official setting of that.
I mean, they could do it, but I wouldn't bother with it personally. That is definitely a risky one. People
Yeah,
who play Dungeons and Dragons want Dungeons and Dragons. Now, that's not necessarily a shit on the 5e system because obviously it's been converted into all sorts of other games. But to release it as a D&D book, I don't foresee that going well.
so to have a modern setting, like I said, 1920s, 1890, especially the 1980s, and having a Dungeons and Dragons fantasy world set in the 1980s would be very interesting to me. Nostalgia is a big kick right now, so the 1980s would probably work, and you can still have all these fantastical monsters and weird things going on, and it will let people like make up some newer monsters as well.
There's already a game out there called Shadowrun. Now, mind you, Shadowrun is in the future, but
I don't
yeah,
want,
it's
yeah, I don't want a future tense game because there's our
I'm aware, but
yeah.
Shadowrun still it actually already does what you're talking about. It's modern era, or in this case, it's slightly future modern, but playable races are trolls and orcs and elves. You've got dragons. You have magic, despite the fact that it also ties in with cyberpunk. It was a kind of a unique setting that I've always loved.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that out there. And so like Shadowrun is a good example, but I kind of would like to see what Wizards' take on that would be.
Sure. Yeah.
Like it doesn't even have to be too expansive or too outlandish or crazy because kind of like Shadowrun is a lot to take in. But
Hmm.
like I think one of the reasons why those settings haven't taken off is that there's nothing. You have to kind of relearn everything. Here's a new word for orc. Here's a new word for elf. Here's a new word for the magic. Here's a new idea how magic works there. And it's just like I think that detachment from the the standard, let's just call it the Lord of the Rings vernacular, is what drives a lot of people away who would otherwise like that setting. Like, I don't know how many games that are out there that have their own word for human, and it annoys the crap out of me.
I mean,
Like,
when you start changing the races, names, and so forth, it's fantastic and it provides a lot. But man, that's getting in depth. That's getting detailed.
right,
Uh,
and like I said, I think a 5e release of a modern day setting, they would keep all the same vernacular that they're used to. And I think more people would be accustomed to jumping over to that than something else.
mhm.
Because like what a D&D troll is. You don't know what a so like people who don't know Shadowrun, what is a Shadowrun troll?
Yeah,
Okay,
yep. I
I,
mean,
I will tell.
in that game they call them troll, but they actually look a lot different than trolls from D&D.
Right. So you know what I thought it was? I just went, okay, well, I'm thinking troll here, so I'm thinking World of Warcraft troll, and I have a samurai sword. So now I'm this World of Warcraft troll with a samurai sword and doing capoeira in the middle of a bar, chopping somebody up.
Yeah,
And that's not the Shadowrun troll. So
no,
that's
no.
that's the problem. There's that detachment that's out there. that's causing that setting not to be as popular as it should be.
Also, Shadowrun is incredibly popular within the role playing crowd. That being said, it's not Dungeons and Dragons. It doesn't have a massive company behind it. I don't even know who owns it anymore. It used to be FASA. For all I know, they're not even around anymore. But
Yeah.
it's probably behind Dungeons and Dragons and all the White Wolf stuff, the vampire stuff. Shadowrun is probably the third most famous and popular of all of the role play settings. Well, I guess
Yeah.
Call of Cthulhu, but it's based off of novels. Yeah, it's
But I think that'd be a very interesting setting and different from everything they put out in the past. But logically for me though, I think they're trying to shift towards a linked universe between Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons. So I think a Planescape book would make the most sense. So you could jump between the different planes.
I wouldn't.
Which
I honestly would not hate seeing another Planescape. When was the last time? Was there a fourth edition Planescape book?
yes, but it was just kind of like, was there?
So
40
third edition had a book of planes. I think that's what it was called, the Book of Planes, or something of that nature, and it detailed all of the planes. But second edition had a legitimate setting called Planescape that had, yeah, it was a campaign. It was just like Dark Sun. It was just like Dragonlance, like Forgotten Realms.
No, they
Yeah.
didn't have that. They just had a book that described all the planes.
Okay. Yeah, and that's fine, but I would actively love to see a return to Planescape as a setting. I don't think that's what we're going to get, but that would be fantastic if it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, even if the book was more centered on the City of Doors, on Sigil, and then had information on all of the attached planes, that would be fine. But Sigil, it's almost like Hobtown, from my own game, where it was a City of Doors where you could go pretty much anywhere within the multiverse that you wanted to. With them doing the expansion, like you're talking about, into Magic the Gathering settings and so forth, it almost makes sense for that to be what comes out.
Yeah.
Like with Tasha's, I know they released that one spell where you can actually travel between worlds. Another way to do it would be through Sigil.
Yeah, I think a lot of those would be useful to have.
Hmm.
It's, I know there's a setting there, but I think like that book comes out when they officially kind of want to merge things together. You
Well,
know,
that's what they've been doing.
yeah, they've been getting close. Yeah, that's for sure. Outside of settings, what other books do you think they need to release for Dungeons and Dragons?
Personally, what I would love to see is just a book of archetypes. I know that's not going to happen. It take them. Yeah, what was it? The Unearthed Arcana. Those ones from Tasha's were on there for fucking years before they finally released them in Tasha's. The game, I I don't know. I think they focus too much on balance at this point. Balance is somewhat important, but honestly, I would just rather have more stuff.
Hmm.
I don't care if something's a little bit broken. Just give us stuff. Give us more stuff.
Yeah.
I know we have the DM's Guild, but I like official stuff. I want a hard copy book in my damn hands.
Well, you can get hard copy books from DM's Guild.
Yeah, I know, but I just want that official D&D. Hey, we released this stuff. Hell, don't even play test it. I don't give two shits. Just say, hey, we didn't play test this. You use this book at your own risk. It could fuck up your campaign.
That's actually a game.
Fuck up your campaign. That's a game.
No, we didn't play test this.
Oh, we didn't play test. There's actually a game called We Didn't Play Test This.
Yeah, you've never heard of it?
I've never heard of it. That's awesome.
Um, it's a card game. Okay. And it's kind of like to say it's like Cards of Humanity is kind of wrong. But basically, you have a set of cards, and you're supposed to hold a certain amount of cards, and you basically have to do the things that are on the card. Like one of the things says, like you have to always talk and rhyme, or you always have to sing all your sentences.
Mhm.
and your whole objective is to basically like do that card and put it down and not draw anymore or something like that.
Okay.
And like it's it's very obvious they didn't actually think about like what's on the cards. He just
We
threw
didn't play
down
test.
stuff. Yeah, they didn't play test it and just pushed it out the door. And it's a very fun game.
It sounds
Uh,
fun. Oh,
uh,
something that just popped in my head. Sorry to throw us back onto the Feywild right quick, but another thing that kind of a little bit points towards Feywild being a possibility is a lot of the spells from Tasha's. So all of the summoning spells, every one of them, it only summons Fey creatures.
okay.
If I recall correctly, I could be just making shit up and totally wrong, but I think all of them are actually Fey creatures that are posing as other beings.
I mean, that works. So one thing that was getting back on our topic, one of the things
Okay,
that
I am incorrect. I stand corrected. Sorry. Or that's other. There are other ones that do that. My bad.
don't worry, you edit the podcast. You can cut this
I'm
out.
not cutting that. I'll leave it. I'll sound like a
You
moron. I
can
don't
save
care.
you can save face, so you're okay.
I don't have to save face. It's my podcast. I do what I want. Go ahead.
My podcast, I do what I want. In fourth edition, there was a DM's Guide 2.
Yeah, you've talked about this before. They had
Have I?
the same. They had the same thing in third edition. It was Dungeon Master's Guide to Player's Handbook 2, so forth. It was just more
Yeah,
information.
they had three. They had three players' handbooks, three monster manuals, and two dungeon master guides. So the of everything tagline is basically the expansions to like the DM's repertoire of things that he can do. But if they were to come out with just something that's just DM's Guild only, just not DM's Guild, just Dungeon Masters only, what could they do for a Dungeon Masters 2 book?
Ooh, man, that is quite a question to throw out. So you could easily add in more magic items. I've gone through every single magic item in the DM's guide by this point. I would
Hmm.
love access to a lot more of them. Something that my other DM does, the one I play with, is he actually utilizes things that we found on the DM's Guild. One of them that we played with last night was it was a book called The Alphabet of Common Magic Items. It was like 50. It was 50 random ridiculous magic items that were absolutely amazing that we came across in our game. Doesn't have any effect upon the game, but it's little stuff like that. That's things that add flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, traps is a big one. That was one of the
Traps,
things that was something I
traps,
liked in Tasha's that they did, or not traps, but puzzles. But they could easily do one for traps as well.
traps is my big thing that they need a whole big revamp on, because Tomb of Annihilation handled traps differently than the other books did, and then on top of that, traps just don't seem to be a thing in Dungeons and Dragons. There are very few places that have them, and you can just walk through them. They don't really hurt anything because just how the game is built. It feels.
Traps have to be dangerous.
Yeah, they're not.
In general, I agree they're not. Tomb of Annihilation, they're not even specifically dangerous. They just sort of wear you down through attrition. You know,
Yeah.
you hit enough of them, and finally, well, those 2d6 of damage finally matters. Yeah,
What
but the common magic items thing, I would like to see more traps. Let's see, what else would we want in there?
on traps? I think they need to do like a Book of Vile Darkness or something.
Yeah,
In
well, Book of
fourth,
Vile
ed-
Darkness was very, very different than traps. That's not
yeah,
even the same thing.
in fourth edition though, it had a lot of traps and like a lot of new trap rules.
Yeah,
And it just had the Book of Vile Darkness had a lot in fourth edition had a lot of the lethal stuff. Honestly, and this is my professional DM opinion, traps should come in non-lethal and lethal variants, and there should be like 10 for every 10 non-lethal traps. There's 100 lethal traps because that's the point of a trap is to be lethal. So here's my DM tip: all traps are lethal make sure your players know about that in the session 0 because it
You could
doesn't make
definitely
sense
do that.
otherwise.
Your players will definitely search for traps much more often if they are actually concerned with them.
And here's the difference would be. If you're Indiana Jones and you're going through the temple at the beginning of the first movie, all those traps in there are lethal traps. Every single one. You fail that save, if it reduces you to 0 hit points, you're dead. But if you're Indiana Jones and you're sneaking through a temple and there's a chest and you open the chest and the chest explodes, that's a non-lethal trap.
Makes sense.
All the contents are destroyed. That's the purpose of that trap. The player is going to take damage and get burned and singed, and that's his punishment for not setting the trap off correctly. And all the valuables on the inside are also gone, and that's the big kicker there. But that's just my two cents.
It's a good 2 cents, and I actually am pretty much in agreement with that. One thing I would love to see if they did another DM's guide would be monster loot. And when I say monster loot, I'm not talking about magic items. I'm talking about when you kill a giant purple worm or a dragon or whatever, a list of what you can actually pull from their corpses. I mean, I know if you've been anyone who's DM'd long enough, when they kill the dragon, they want to take the teeth, they want to take the scales, they want to then make armor out of it. And having a detailed list, maybe not every single monster, but just a generalized list of what you could pull from critters and what they would actually be used for in crafting, or even if you just consume it. What happens if you consume the eyeball of a hag? Things like that.
Yeah, just monster tables that have general loot for goblinoids and
Yeah.
dragons and
Yeah, and I'm
whatnot.
not talking about stuff they're carrying. I'm talking about stuff that you can actually harvest from them.
Well,
There's
you need a little bit
there's
of both.
well, you could do that too, but that's not what I mean, yeah, it is always funny when you pull lint out of the pocket of some kobold or something or other. But there's a book that my other DM uses that he got off of the DM's Guild. I think it's just titled Monster Loot. The author was Anne Gregerson, and she had a whole bunch of these. We've been using them in the Maw campaign, and it's been pretty awesome. Every time we kill something, especially when it's something we haven't come across before. A while back, we killed some Yugoloths, and we harvested these things and got all sorts of crap off of them. Most of it we may just be carrying around. We might not ever use it, but if we decide to, we can brew potions with it. We could just consume it and take whatever the effects are, so forth. It's just kind of a neat addition, and I would love to see that actually brought to life in an official book.
Yeah. When I was doing 4th edition, I decided to do an experiment with how loot was handed out. And I took a giant poster board and I put on, I think it was like a row of like maybe 6 by 10 or 8 by 10. And what it was, I just took a bunch of common lands and I wrote for Magic the Gathering, a bunch of common lands for Magic the Gathering, wrote what was on them, like what this loot would be. So let's say like a +1 weapon or 100 gold or a pile of rocks, you
Yeah.
know. And I basically put double-sided tape on them and I put them on the poster board. So I would let the players after every combat pull from the board like maybe one per monster killed
That
or
sounds that sounds so much fun. I love this idea.
and it was great until I think our buddy John Goulas figured out which one was the magic item one and kept pulling that same one over and over again.
Curses.
But it was a great idea. It worked well. And I would basically just once the board was empty, I'd refill it back up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
or change dungeons, I'd fill it back up, and it worked really well. It was kind of bulky to have around. And that was the only real downside to it. Um, but it was a lot of fun watching people kind of like pull from the board and like, all right, what did I get? A pile of shit! Hooray!
Look,
So,
empty bag.
so the best one, and this is what literally happened, is our buddy John Gula again was pulling from the board and pulled um, a handful of broken vials, and an empty leather bag. And he goes, "All right, hey Chris, can I put these empty glass vials into this leather bag?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "And then I'm just gonna start bashing the bag and with a rock or something, and just grind that glass up to a fine powder." I'm like, "Okay, you can do that." I was like, "Good." And then like the next combat, he goes, "Remember that bag?" Well, I open it up and I just chuck it at the enemy's eyes.
Yep.
That good old trick.
It's a blindness spell. Oh, hashtag pocket sand.
I mean, that's like the best, most lethal thing you could do to somebody, because
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah.
if you throw broken glass into somebody's eye, what's the first thing that they do?
I would imagine start screaming, "Oh my god, my eyes," and then grab their eyes.
Yeah, they start rubbing their eyes.
Yeah.
So,
It's not going to help. It's just not.
they're blind forever now.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about what we did in the Maw campaign last night before we get off of here, because my god, it was epic.
Go
It
ahead.
was amazing. All right. So first things first, before I even start on this, I have to give props to all of the other people I play with, including the DM, for being massively good sports. I just play with some fucking fantastic people, and I appreciate them for it. Now, the Maw, as I've said before in previous podcasts, it's a world of undead. Just undead all the time. It's a horrible place. And it used to be an ancient elven kingdom. So we find this old ass tower, 8 or 9 stories tall, and we decide that we're going to go explore it. So we go inside of it. Turns out it was a facility for magical research that the elves used to use thousands of years ago. The first floor is there's an illusionary elf that pops up that sort of says, we'll give you a guided tour and so forth. There's like a gift shop off to the right. You got administration off to the left. So we end up getting our badges, and we must be accompanied by an elf the whole time we're in there. Fortunately, we had one elf in the party. And we start going through, and there's a cafeteria on the first floor with a couple of vending machines. Yes, I said vending machines in Dungeons and Dragons because our DM's amazing. So I go over there and put in a gold coin. And then, of course, like all vending machines, I can't get the donuts out. It just won't let go of them. So I put another gold coin in, and the the bag of chips that is above the donuts falls down, gets hung up on the donuts. So I start shaking the machine. Then the fighter comes over, starts shaking it, and then it falls over and nearly kills him, because that's what happens when you shake vending machines. Anyway, we it's ridiculous. I'm aware. We don't really play to be serious. We play to have fun. So we go in another room that was down there, and it's cubicles. It's fucking office cubicles with TPS reports everywhere. And then we start progressing up the tower. The first floor, they were researching anger, and it makes us a little grumpy the whole time we're there. Everything is throwing rage-based attacks. It's a barbarian that we have to fight. There's some sort of an undead barbarian that berserks on us. I don't recall what the second floor was. The third floor was sleep research. Oh, the second floor was invisibility research. The third floor was sleep research. So we get up to the third floor, and there's an elf that's hooked up to a machine in a deep ass sleep. Now, mind you, this elf has been here for a couple thousand years, probably. So I'm standing here having a conversation with other people on how to wake this guy up safely. And while I'm standing there, the assassin ranger rogue who can deal 161 damage in a round ends up shooting an arrow into the guy's leg trying to wake him up.
Okay.
This he's like a 0 level commoner.
He's dead.
That one attack more than doubles his hit points, immediate death. At that point, my character, who is a neutral good wizard, has had enough of this character. That is the third or fourth time I have seen him attack innocent people. So I'm like, no, I'm just done with this shit. So I immediately hit him with Tasha's Mind Whip, of which he fails the save, and then all out PvP hell breaks out as we murder this character.
Okay.
In all the time we've been doing this podcast, have you ever heard me tell a story of me instigating PvP?
Not on this podcast.
Yeah, because it doesn't happen. I haven't instigated PvP in Dungeons and Dragons in over 20 years. Uh, Generally, I avoid it because it's detrimental to the game most of the time, and it just causes problems. But in this case, he was playing an evil ass character. He's running around with a bunch of good characters, and he was kind of a shitbag. We were all fed up with that character. I'm just the one who had enough of it, so I went ahead and instigated. The guy playing it, Drew, fucking great player. You know, he makes broke ass characters, but he is a damn good player. He just rolled with the punches. He didn't give two shits that his character died. He just made a new character, and we just continued on our way. So as he's working on his other character, we're still playing. We're inside the tower. We're down a person. We're like, okay, we're just going to word of recall out and go back to town, take a breather. We'll come back to the tower in a few days. So our cleric casts word of recall that should have taken us back to the town. If you're familiar with word of recall, it's like teleport. There's a chance that it goes awry. And he rolled I think he rolled like a 4 or 7 or something. So the spell, it just goes off kilter. One of us ended up in the town. One of us ended up a half mile away. Or no, two of us ended up a half mile away from the town. And the cleric who cast the spell, who had 2 hit points left, because that's who the assassin went after, ends up teleporting like a mile away from the town by himself. And the DM just rolling up random shit. You know, maybe somebody lands near a monster, maybe something happens, ends up rolling up a random encounter right where the cleric with almost no hit points lands at. And it just happened. And it is not a safe place. Like, there are Draco liches there, there are all sorts of other nasty shit there, and he lands right next to a fucking Alhoon, which is a Mind Flayer lich. At this point, we're like, wow, so 2 people are going to be rolling up new characters. So the Alhoon goes first. It tried something, I don't recall what it was, charm or some shit like that, and he makes his saving throw against it, if I recall correctly. So then the cleric gets his turn. He ends up doing divine intervention. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. What does his specifically do though?
I mean, it's all divine interventions do pretty much the same thing. You can call upon your deity to give you some sort of a boon, but you have it's like a 10% chance, give or
Yeah.
take, that it succeeds. By God, he rolled a fucking 4 on percentiles. Like, it was a miracle. This character should have been dead. It should have been over with. He ends up rolling a 4 on percentiles and just has his deity teleport him back into town. I've seen divine intervention used many times before, and I've never actually seen it work. So just this was a dire situation, and he actually pulled it off. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's my story of last night. It was amazing to see.
Not spoiling anything, but our next Rhyme of the Frost Maiden session may not begin with a PvP encounter.
Ooh, again, another one.
Yeah, I
Don't
don't.
yeah. You can tell me
I
about it after the podcast. Maybe
yeah.
maybe we can record. We'll record you telling me about it, and then maybe we will release it another way.
All right. That's it for tonight, folks. Thank you for joining us in this wonderful podcast.
Thank you guys for listening. It was fun. I enjoyed getting to tell that story. Oh,
Oh,
there's one other thing I forgot to mention about that tower. So it's an elven tower, and it actually had like magic brooms, you know, that would sweep up the place. And on the closet above it, it said Broomba. All right, that's it. Good night.
follow us on Twitter at Grumpy DMs, Grumpy_DMs, and follow us on Facebook as well, Grumpy Dungeon Masters. Follow us on Twitch at Grumpy Dungeon Masters, and everything Grumpy Dungeon Masters everywhere else. Just search for Grumpy Dungeon Masters, you'll find us. Bye.
Craig. Bye, guys.